Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby, here with Judy Greer, who plays District Attorney Leah Askey in the NBC Dateline and podcast inspired The Thing About Pam. It's so good. First up, I'm a Dateline junkie, so I've been all over this for quite a while. When did you first become aware of the case, and then how many seconds did it take for you to become obsessed with it?
Well, the first time the podcast aired, I remember people talking about it and listening to it. I can't remember if I listened to the whole thing or not. I remember that when I should say that when I revisited it to play Leah Askey was, obviously I was listening for different reasons, but it really like sunk in. And yeah, it was like 3 seconds before I was like, this is insane. Also, I'm from the Midwest. So I'm not from Missouri, I'm from Michigan, but like, I feel like I know these people and like hearing their voices and stuff, the accents were so familiar to me. And of course, like, well, I'm probably like a nosy neighbor. I hope my neighbors who I love are listening to this, but I'm always like, the idea that like you could be living right next door to someone like this, like, that was what's so crazy. Yeah, so I was quickly obsessed.
And so weird that it took so like she seems so normal until like suddenly her 60s. That's what I found so weird about it all. It's just how her life progressed.
Well, it also begs the question, like, what was going on before then that we don't know about,
Exactly. And there's footage of Leah Askey, obviously, but she's not as prominent of a figure as Pam. So what was your process for getting into character? Because you don't need to copy her. What did you want to bring to Leah as a character going into this series?
Well, it's always tricky. And I haven't done much of it in my career so far, playing people who are alive. It might be my first, actually. I've played some dead people, but never living people.
Yeah.
So it's like, first of all, I was always reminding myself that we're doing an interpretation of a true story. So we're not like recreating it. We're not like live reenacting, we're doing our interpretation. We're adding tone and we're showing it from a certain point of view. So I didn't feel like I needed to be copying this character exactly. But I was looking for traits I could really relate to with Leah. And one was definitely like being a woman in a man's world and being in an environment that is usually populated by men. And another is just being 100% certain about things, like wanting to be right and needing to be right, but also believing that you're right and having to prove yourself constantly to people who, for whatever reason, don't believe you. And so while of course there's things about this character that I disagree with, Judy like disagrees with, I was able to find the things about Leah that I had compassion for. And so those were some of the traits. And then I try to be, I don't know, some basic acting shit, like listen, respond, like know my lines, see where the scene takes me, take direction from my directors when they're giving it, like stuff like that. Makes it easy. I mean, I'm not on an island. Luckily, I have an incredible script. I've had incredible directors on Pam. We had great producers and creative producers. And then Renée being a producer, but also playing Pam. Like Renée and Josh Duhamel were so incredible to work with and forced me to rise to a level that I had always hoped I had inside me, and like wanting to get it right and be as good as they were, was also, I like get a little, definitely I got like a charge from their performances and from acting with them.
And there's a dark comedy. I mean, that's the lens this is told through. And it's not really making fun of the tragedy. It's kind of the absurdity of Pam and how this all went down. It's just like kind of like you cannot make this up. So when you're walking when you're walking that sort of tightrope of funny and tragedy, is that when you just trust the writing, or how do you walk that tightrope?
I trust the writing and the directing. I mean, I think that is tricky. So it does take like a really focused showrunner and we had 3 directors on the project. So making sure that everyone is communicating really well and everyone is on the same page and that we are getting the same kind of direction from each director so that we're maintaining a tone, while the story unfolds and it just becomes like this sort of crazy bloomin' onion, like it just seems like every episode you're like, nah. And then the next episode you're like, nah. And then it's like, what? Like, so having directors that know how to, even though there's 3 different ones, to keep building this and make it feel like it's one person telling the story, like that's really tricky. And I feel like the team really nailed it. And I was lucky in that sense. I think, I've certainly worked with directors that weren't maybe as seasoned, and so you have to rely on other factors. But in this case, with Jenny Klein as the showrunner and the other like directors, producers, Renee, like people involved, I felt like I was in really good hands and I didn't have to worry too much about it. Tone is tricky, that's I'm learning so much as I stick it out in this career, is how important tone, I would say, maintaining tone. And I got really great advice from a producer that I worked with once a while back, Helen Estabrook. And she said that that's the trickiest thing for directors, is maintaining tone. And that's one of the things I really look for now, when I'm watching things, but also when I'm reading scripts. Like, is there something that's jumping out at me tone wise? And is there something that worries me that we're going to have a hard time maintaining it, like in the writing? And this was like the whole package. It was so great. But I think that getting that tone right, I was asking early on, and someone, I forget who, was like, well, think of like Fargo a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really helpful for me. I used to think it wasn't important for me as an actor to understand the tone, because I've always thought like my performance is my performance. And I just try to be really honest in the moment. But as I continue to act, I'm realizing that it is helpful to know like what people are going for. Although I could watch my performance from in films and TV shows from years and years ago before I started to really care about it, and I probably wouldn't notice a difference. But at least in my brain now, I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. But also, just to go back to what you said about this being a horrific crime, a series of horrific crimes that this woman has committed, some allegedly, some not, that is tricky. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want the victims' families to feel like we are not taking the crimes and the loss seriously. And so that was very important to all of us. And we, especially during those courtroom scenes, like really kept on the forefront of our minds, like these are real people who were really murdered. And it is very important that we tell this story from our point of view, but honestly.
I talked to Renee a couple weeks ago, and I asked.
So jealous. I'm going to talk to her tonight, but I'm still jealous.
I asked about her scenes with you, and she immediately started laughing. And then she said, first of all, she said you were brilliant. And then my question, were you able to keep a straight face through some of those conversations that you were having? She told me that, sometimes she would either have to start counting in her head, or she would just try to ignore you while looking at you, because she thought she would break it, like if she didn't just focus on herself. So what was it like for you acting opposite her in full prosthetic? What is that like?
I mean, well, I have so many things to say about that. First of all, she could not break character, because it would be an hour to put her face back together if she did. So that is some high stakes acting that we were doing with each other. I never met Renee. So I showed up, we started shooting in early October, and I never got to meet Renée Zellweger as Renée Zellweger until Thanksgiving Day. So it was like about 2 months before I ever saw this woman as herself. We were doing like Zoom table reads and stuff, but also she would be at work before anyone else, starting to go through the process, and the last one to leave, taking this whole process off. So there was that. But the first time I saw her walk into the first scene we had was in my office, I just was blown away. And I've been such a huge fan of hers for so many years. And I didn't know anyone who knew her. I didn't know what to expect. I just thought, like, anyone that is this incredible of an actress and that has a career that has spanned so many years, but also so many roles, like has this much range and depth, like she's probably going to be out of her mind. And like the second we met each other on that set, we were like already laughing, already joking, already having so much fun. Like, and then she would just immediately like be Pam in a scene, and then they would be, you know, saying cut, and then she was just Renée again. And the whole process was, on that first day working with her, I was just blown away. I was like, how can she be so good and be so relaxed and easy and like fun to shoot the shit with? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast. Yeah. Like, she's so cool to hang out with. And I thought, I had her on a pedestal before I met her. So I thought usually people, when you start to hang out with them for many months, become a lot more human, but I don't know, her pedestal just like got taller. Like, she's just incredible. She's incredible.
And I mean, they're part of so many TV and film dramas, but I always still think that courtroom scenes are like, look so difficult and intimidating. What is it like working with just that dialogue with Josh Duhamel, who is, I grew up in North Dakota, so like shout out to North Dakotans out there from me and Josh Duhamel. But what was that process like for you?
Well, I mean, Josh is really fun to mess with. Like, and as Leah, I can only imagine how she must have felt arguing a case against Joel. But Josh himself is like really fun to make jokes to, like during his coverage, like to give him looks or make faces at him and stuff. Like, it was really fun to do that, because it also didn't feel very far away from the character I was creating. Like, and it is really hard to keep courtroom scenes fresh. And we were in that courtroom for 9 days, and it was a really long time. And to be keeping, like I was saying before, to be honoring the victims, but also like keeping our energy up and like keeping this like living scene, like these arguments fresh every time we would go up to the stand, and every time they would move the cameras, and like a whole entire day doing my opening statements and my closing statements. Like, but that's our job, you know, that's what we're supposed to be able to do, is to make it look like the first time every time. But Josh, I just think he just blew me away in this. I didn't know what to expect. But as soon as, I think all of us, like as soon as we got like our wigs on and our costumes on, we just became these other people that were so fun. It was so fun to see someone so different in the mirror when I looked at myself. And it was so fun to see Josh looking the way he looked. And I was so impressed with him. And I just like, I felt like we were really like competing against each other. Even sometimes it was just to like do a full take without messing up. Like, it added something to those scenes. Whatever you can do to make it real and keep it fresh, I think anything goes. I also ate a lot of Skittles during the courtroom scenes, because sometimes my energy would get low and I would find people hiding Skittles like underneath my props because they knew I liked them so much. And that was my secret acting trick, was tasting the rainbow.
I did love the hair and the posture and just everything about that. So real quickly, you're also in another series getting a lot of buzz. The First Lady is on Showtime.
Yeah.
You play Nancy Howe, a personal assistant to Betty Ford. What's that like, you know, working with Michelle Pfeiffer, and I mean, just a whole ensemble cast that's amazing. what's that like to be a part of that?
Well, that was a real honor. Michelle Pfeiffer is an icon. And so being in a room with her was like, she's so beautiful and she's so talented. And sometimes, sometimes you just can't believe like someone could have so much. Like, I don't know. She just became Betty Ford to me. Like, she is that character to me now. And getting to act with her, and so much of our scenes are like my character kind of like, propping her up and like saying like, hey, you can do this, like you should do this. So to have to be the pusher to Michelle Pfeiffer was so strange, because I was like so nervous. Definitely like the first week I was with her, I was like, I can't, how am I gonna like come off as like the confident one that's like, girl, you should get that ERA ratified. Like it was surreal, but it's fun to see Michelle thinking. And like, that's, I think what's so cool about how she played Betty was that Betty was very thoughtful, and she was really in front of our faces. I watched Michelle like come up with ideas and make these decisions as Betty Ford. And it was like being a part of history, weirdly, and like playing dress up, but also like a story about history in my country that I just kind of forgot about. I mean, it was before I was born, but so much of those things have affected me, from, the Ford administration and coming out of Nixon and then going into Jimmy. It's like all these things were things that people were still talking about when I was starting to have memories, and I think Betty Ford is one of those incredible first ladies who is so overlooked, and how much she accomplished in like a year. I mean, obviously the Betty Ford Clinic was her legacy, and that was many years after and continuing. But, that she gave a voice to addiction, a face to addiction. She made it. I mean, if the first lady can talk about being an addict, like everyone can. She gave a voice to women who had breast cancer, who could start asking for mammograms. Like, she made it okay to tell your doctor you wanted a mammogram. I mean, she brought back to life the ERA, which still hasn't been ratified, but like, something that she took on herself. I mean, she was basically the president while the Fords were in office. And that, I have on my bookshelf behind me the Betty Ford biography, which I bought before I started the job. I read 3 of her biographies, but that one, this famous one with the cover of her sitting on the table in the White House, is just so incredible. And I was like reading this, preparing to go to Atlanta and shoot this, thinking like, I'm such a dum-dum. Like, how did I not know about any of this? How did I not realize that this woman was a trailblazer, and she just was incapable of thinking small or taking no for an answer? And I think Michelle has those qualities. Otherwise, she wouldn't have, been chosen to play Betty Ford or been asked to. But I mean, she is like that. And she has this like fierceness under her that is really, she just takes over a room. And I should say she takes over a room when she wants to. And when she doesn't want to, like, the ball's always in her court. And it's really fun to watch someone like choose their moments carefully.
It's amazing how your concept of time changes as you get older as well. Like 20 years ago was just 2000, but in the 80s, when I was born, I thought like the 60s might as well have been the 1800s in my own mind.
I know. It's true. I mean, it felt like the 60s feel, I mean, it is a generation ago, but it felt like, yes, it might as well have been 100 years ago.
Well, Judy Greer, congratulations on your incredible TV season. The Thing About Pam is streaming on Peacock and Hulu. The First Lady is on Showtime. To our viewers watching, head over to goldderby.com, make your awards predictions, beat the experts, check out more interviews with top contenders. And Judy, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.